Hi, my name is Naomi Curran, and today I'm going to be talking about religion and the spectacle of suffering in Baroque art. The Baroque period, particularly during the Counter Reformation, is characterized by a complex interplay of religious violence and the spectacle of suffering, as vividly depicted in the art of the time. This era, spanning the 1500s to mid 1600s, was marked by significant socio political upheaval, which artists like Caravaggio and Ribera, which I have in my exhibition, navigated through their works. The Counter Reformation sought to reaffirm Catholic doctrine in the face of Protestant challenges, and art became a crucial medium for conveying the Church's messages of faith, martyrdom, and divine justice. The scope of my exhibition is generally pretty wide, filtered mainly by topic, but the constraints that I used specifically were art from the 1600s, within or soon after the Counter Reformation, which ended in around 1648, a focus on standalone paintings rather than sculpture, altarpieces, or series of paintings like triptychs, and images of active violence, or in one very specific case, confirmed martyrdom. These are people who are already dead. There are three significant themes that I'm going to discuss today in my exhibition, and they are as follows: religious violence in the Counter Reformation, suffering as a testament to faith, think like trials to make you seem more pious. In this case, that would be martyrdom, and then gender as it relates to depictions of martyrdom. The first room in my exhibition is comprised of three depictions of the martyrdom of Saint Bartholomew. The paintings by Matteo Preti between 1656 and 1666, Giuseppe de Bravera in the 1610s, and Valentin de Bologna in 1615. Saint Bartholomew was one of Jesus' apostles, who is said to have been martyred by flaying and beheading at the command of the Armenian king Astyages. Paintings of him tend to be brutal, and there are even famous sculptures of him completely skinned, or ones with Jesus holding his skin alone. I picked these three pieces specifically because of the stripped down compositions and the way each of them seems to make the viewer an active participant in the gory act via the realism in the saint's anatomy. Another interesting point of analysis is the appearance of the perpetrators, who, according to stories, are Armenian and therefore should be darker skinned. The three artists handle this in three different ways that I will discuss in much greater detail in my actual exhibit. The artists focus on the skin and flesh of the saint, not only highlight the physical suffering, but also engage with the theological implications of martyrdom, suggesting the act of suffering is integral to the saint's sanctity. The second room in my exhibition contains three paintings of a martyred John the Baptist. I chose three works: Pier Francesco Mazzucchelli's The Beheading of St. John the Baptist from 1620, Caravaggio's Salome Receiving the Head of St. John the Baptist from 1609, and Karel Fabritius's The Beheading of St. John the Baptist from 1648. John, or his actual name was most likely Yahya, was a Jewish prophet in the first decade BCE who was revered by the Christian church as a forerunner of Jesus. He was beheaded on the request of King Herod's daughter and gifted to her on a silver platter by the executioner. There's this theme of guilt and consequences in paintings depicting the scene with Salome, depicted specifically in the three works that I chose. Some compositions that I came across depicted the actual act of beheading, but I decided to choose images that instead showed the moment the trophy is presented to Princess Salome. The three works vary in composition, color, and technique, which make them interesting. For example, the colors in Caravaggio and Fabritius's work is similar, but both Caravaggio and Mazzucchelli are Italian, and some of Mazzucchelli's works even take direct inspiration from Caravaggio. The third room in my exhibition focuses on the paintings of female martyrs. These depictions can be used to illustrate the gender dimensions of suffering in Baroque art. In portrayals of early Christian female martyrs, such as St. Catherine of Alexandria, St. Cecilia, and St. Apollona, as seen in this room, Baroque artists place emphasis on the veneration of these saints without the distraction of graphic suffering. This distinction in representation can be understood within the context of societal attitudes towards gender in the 17th century. The three works I have chosen for this room are Sainte Apolline by Francisco de Zurbarán in 1650, The Martyrdom of St. Catherine of Alexandria by Mattia Preti in 1659, and The Martyrdom of St. Cecilia by Carlo Saraceni in 1610. I picked these three paintings because I felt that they best represented the vast differences in the way that these women in these types of scenes, during the same time period as the ones I picked for the male martyrs, are depicted in contrast to them. Two of the paintings depict the moments before the act of violence, a tormentor with his weapon raised and body poised to take the swing and end the respective young woman's life. The third, Sainte Apolline, may seem out of place at first, but is in fact confirmed to be symbolizing her martyrdom after it took place. The young maiden holds a palm frond and a set of metal steps holding a human tooth. The frond is a mainstay symbol for female martyrs and can be seen across many compositions, for example, Artemisia's self portrait as Catherine of Alexandria. But the tooth is specific to Apollona and the torture she was put through, having all of her teeth pulled out and subsequently shattered before she was killed. The three women depicted in these paintings are virgin martyrs, painted as beautiful maidens in fine clothes. One, the scene in the middle, even has her breast exposed. But the raw quality and the visceral emotion present in depictions of male martyrs is no longer present. They are serene and pure. The final room of my exhibition is to house two paintings of Jesus facing his death. One by Francisco de Zurbarán in 1627, and the other by Jan van den Hoek. I decided to include these two paintings as depictions of Christ during this period tend to wrestle with this intersection between divinity and humanity in one figure. When Jesus is depicted in death or in the violent context of the crucifixion, how did Baroque artists portray the event in contrast to the martyrdom of other saints? In my first pick, The Crucifixion by Zurbarán, Jesus is depicted on the cross alone, in a void-like space. He uses heavy chiaroscuro with the central figure of Jesus depicted as the only light on this very solid, dark background. He is both idealized by this light and the otherworldly empty space, but humanized by his realistic anatomy and the wounds around his head and the realistic drapery of this fabric. In direct contrast, the other painting, Cavalry by Van den Hoek, shows the act of Jesus carrying the cross to Calvary, surrounded by a crowd of mourning supporters intermixed with Roman soldiers preparing to enact more torture upon his grieving body. In this depiction, he is in the active scenario of martyrdom. There is no serenity here. He is human. Despite the glow emanating from his thorny crown, he remains surrounded by the chaos of the event. To conclude my exhibition presentation today, I want to talk about the Baroque period and how my exhibition reflects that. The Baroque period's exploration of religious violence and the spectacle of suffering reveals a nuanced understanding of martyrdom as a means of reinforcing faith. Through the works of various artists, we see how the representation of suffering, whether serene or brutal, serves to elevate the status of martyrs and engage viewers in a profound dialogue about topics like faith, gender, and the transformative power of suffering. The Counter-Reformation's emphasis on visual art as a tool for spiritual edification or propaganda is evident in these works as they navigate the delicate balance between depicting violence and inspiring devotion. Thank you so much for listening. This was my presentation.